Hello, you lot. Welcome to Pirate News, the time-travelling radio hour broadcast to you by Captain Vasorius Grimyor. I'm your leading anchor, just in time, and for this week's installment, we will be kicking on the Time Warp engines, sponsored by the University of Memphis History Department, to pop in on a discussion between two historians as they mull over the contents of Vladimir Volkoff's book, Vladimir the Russian Viking. With us today, we have the young medieval scholar, Konrad Bennett Hughes, and the prestigious professor, Dr. Znamenski, who is an expert on esoteric and Russian history, having written several books upon the subject, including Beauty of the Primitive and the Red Shambhala. Links can be found to both of their writings in the informational section. So, laddies and lasses, hold on to your haberdasheries as we blast back in time with another brilliant episode of Pirate News.
Say the title.
Vladimir the Russian Viking, the first complete biography of the extraordinary prince who founded the Russian state and converted his people to Christianity. It's the full title.
So what is your general impression of the book? Tell me.
I think Volkoff gives a good overview of the era of this Viking era in Russian history, and of kind of a feel for the life of this mixture of Norse and Slavic cultures, the way they react to the Greek Christianity. However, it's very, he's very biased. He has a certain slant he's trying to write towards. It definitely glorifies Vladimir, maybe too much. He compares him to Charlemagne and King Arthur over and over, which is interesting. And I'm not going to say not true, but they're both characters that have been turned into myth more than real history. So that's sometimes where I think he toes this line of history and myth and doesn't always tell you when he's telling one or the other, and so that's where he can fall. But he does admit at the beginning, he states that I'm going to oversimplify instead of being using cynicism or being fantastic. But I think he is a little fantastic, even though I think he's trying not to be. Definitely.
Did you read about? Did you go online to check his biography, who he was?
I did.
Because it's interesting. Yeah, I'm glad that you did it, because it's always interesting to research.
Right, who they are,
of a particular writer,
right,
to understand, what kind of bias,
where he's coming from, right. And so he's very pro-Russian, but he's against the new Russian state that's been around. I think he's very anti-communist, seemingly, growing up as an exile, kind of in France, but with Russian parents that held on to their Russian culture. I don't know. You probably understand that a bit too.
It's definitely very nationalistic.
Yeah, but it's very nationalistic. Yeah.
Another thing is, so what is his view of history, early Russian history? What's the paradigm? You can see the scheme or paradigm.
Yeah.
He tries to promote. What does he try to promote?
Well, he's promoting that these Norse Vikings came in, and as the Chronicle states. That he's, 75% of his source material is from the Chronicle of the Bygone Years, that the Slavs had no rule and asked the Vikings to come rule them, basically, which how true is that? Probably not very much, probably very much the church used that idea.
In this case.
Yeah, again.
So maybe I actually put a trap for you. So in this case, when I said nationalistic, it's kind of yes and no. So in this case, we might kind of find out the answer who he was in reality. What was his bias in this case?
Yeah, no. What is his bias? Because this is a very unnationalistic kind of way that probably a lot of people who are pro-Russian don't want to say, oh, Vikings started our first great kingdom, and as the book states at the end, it was really the seed that later became, the real Russian Empire. It wasn't at this point really, because it's not a feudalist nation. As much as he had these tribes under him and these cities under him, he wasn't a feudal king. And sometimes I think it's easy to forget that when you read this stuff and a lot about later medieval history. It's easy to forget that this is not a feudal king. He doesn't have that kind of power. But he puts Vladimir on this pedestal of being the founder of the Russian Church and its freedom from the Byzantine Church, which is an important part of its Orthodox nature, especially at the beginning. And he talks about the different influences. He tries to trace the influences in his family of how he comes to this point of reconciling with Christianity, which is an important thing for a pagan to do.
So let's just take you into this direction. So how, in the kind of view of Volkoff, he brought himself to Christianity in his interpretation. So remember, many gods, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And how he moved from many gods to one god. So what prompted him?
It's a political move, in the most overt way. However, philosophically, he might have been. Volkoff states that he might have been disenchanted with pagan religion, though he performs pagan, like he is, all about it when he's doing it. But as soon as he switches, he's all about Christianity and converts all of Novgorod at sword point, basically. But I think that the Byzantine relations is a big part. But then his grandmother Olga, I think Vladimir definitely remembered maybe his childhood and her being one of the few Christians at that point in Russia.
Great point. So there was some kind of background.
Right.
It wasn't just from scratch. Yeah?
No. Well, there had already been a monk or a priest who had gone out into Russia and tried to proselytize, and some things said that he converted all of Russia to Christianity. Whether he converted a few people or a bunch of people and they turned immediately back as soon as he left or whatever, there had definitely been Christianity there and present for 100 years maybe even, as long as that, before he really makes the stride to we're going to turn into a Christian nation, because this is the beginning of their nationhood, But in the end, it's the Byzantines need help, and he sees that marrying a Byzantine princess as the most politically entrepreneurial thing he could do, in his state. Like as it talks about in the book several times, that he does not have the status to marry into the purple of the Byzantine emperors. He just doesn't. No king does, really. And that's the issue that they have. They don't have anyone for their women to marry. So in this time of trouble, they have to pawn off their daughters, or their sister, I think it's his sister, to Vladimir for his troops.
Yeah. So how this this concrete question? So how did it happen? The act of conversion. So where and how did you look into this? Or you skimmed it? When she finally shows up after he's besieged one of the Byzantine cities to threaten them, to be like, you got to send me the princess. I send you troops. They finally send the princess after all this, squabbling, and she basically has to kind of convince him, right? And so I think that he portrays it, and the sources must, that she played some sort of pivotal role then in this conversion. So that's a second woman that's played the biggest part in Vladimir's conversion. Olga, his grandmother, and then his wife, which, I don't know, seems somewhat important, because Russian women have a certain amount of power that women in the Western European cultures don't have at this point. There's certain not power, but at that time. Yeah, sorry, at that time. Later it changes. Yes. But it talks about how they had a little bit of autonomy. Women a little bit more than they did in feudal Europe, which is starting to come about, and women are really, really getting suppressed in the Catholic Church. Oh, that's what Volkoff said.
Yeah, that's what Volkoff says. Now, I don't know how I haven't read enough of the other sources to be able to give another direction from look at that. But yeah, I think that. So then, she gets him to baptize himself, or not baptize himself, but who baptized him? Now I can't remember. Well, a priest comes with her, I think, that baptizes him, and then he performs baptisms on people
in Crimea.
Later on, which is again like reverting back to his pagan head of the church, which he was the head of the church in their pagan beliefs. He was the one that did sacrifices and did rituals, and so that, I don't know, it's kind of interesting because kings in Europe aren't heads of the church at this point. It's not for another 400, 500 years, King Henry VIII. So that's another interesting part of the conversion tale that I think is there. That and how I don't know how.
What is this again? What's you said another part of conversion tale? In case you said this is another part.
Yeah, the part that he baptizes people too.
Yes,
that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Can we address this? Because how in the interpretation of Volkoff?
Yeah.
Because there's a lot of, I wouldn't say controversy, but different authors view it in a different way,
Yeah.
For example, right now, this kind of critically thinking historians in Russia, they try to collect whatever meager sources they have. They say it was essentially a kind of brutal baptism.
Mm-hmm.
How does Volkoff cover this?
Oh, he shows it very much not. And that
what does he? How does he paint it?
Yeah, well, he paints Vladimir as a benevolent ruler who, once he converts to Christianity, gives up all his brutal ways and his lechery, which he had been doing and starting wars and things before. And in the conversions, it's that has it by divine right, and he has won that divine right. Not through might of arms, but through marriage and through conversion himself, has made him, the head of the state, not just because like his father by brutal, strength. And so it's a big difference and a shift in how we think about kingship that's happening in Europe at this time, and to see it this early in Russia, if what Volkoff says is all true, is pretty interesting, because you don't see it in Western Europe till quite a bit later. Really, the divine right becomes. I mean, you saw it with Charlemagne for sure, but it kind of like falls away and comes back. So, I just said Charlemagne. I just compared him to Charlemagne. So I guess I give flack for it.
From original viewpoint. So. I guess he played for this particular Slavic area the same role Charlemagne played, although Charlemagne's role was bigger, of course.
Yeah.
What Vladimir did, it was more parochial, I would say, from my viewpoint. Yeah. Maybe I'm a kind of prone too much to Western civilization. I have a bias here. Russian nationalist or kind of whatever, cultural.
Yeah.
Well, try to engage this cultural superiority of Russia. How these people, non-Western cultures, they always try to kind of show their
I think
non-Western perspective is superior to Western perspective.
Well, I think what he doesn't address, but he accidentally kind of says in the Viking, ness of Vladimir, is that it isn't an Eastern thing, or it isn't a Western. Yes. It's a mix. You need both. You need everybody.
That's a good part of his book.
Yeah. But he doesn't expressly say that exactly ever.
Because he's trapped into
right. What he could have easily said had a whole little section on the brutalness of the Viking nature that we see in the Norman conquests in Sicily and England and the Crusades is harnessed here in him and his sons and in his father with Slavic culture and with Slavic blood. And he says that, but doesn't quite ever give credence to, this is we need both sides. It's Slavic,
I totally agree with you, because he could have said plainly that it's a part of this European domain, But he is driven by something, Although he is a European, I'm sure Volkoff, who kind of grew up in immigration. Again, it's obvious, but